The Israelis have death and destruction as their principal aim. This is a war of delusions.
This time, I think Iranians are saying we're going to take the revenge from Israel.
We've already seen 60% of the American public is not in favor of any of the military action.
It's getting worse, and it will be more with the days to come because the objectives are different from what the declared one and undeclared one.
The war zone now covers the entire Gulf. It is in this space that we have 10 million Indians. I don't understand our approach and I regret it very deeply.
Hello and welcome to this episode of India and the World on DeKoder. I'm Nidhi Razdan. Well, we are on the fourth day of the US-Israeli strikes against Iran, and this is a war that is only intensifying and escalating. As the government of India has said today, the situation is deteriorating, and in fact, the Ministry of External Affairs has also gone on to say that some Indian nationals have also lost their lives in the attacks and counterattacks that we've seen over the last few days. Now, as more and more countries are getting wrapped up in this conflict, there are consequences not just for the Gulf region but for the entire world. Firstly, President Trump, in his latest comments, has said that this is a war that could go on for 4 or 5 weeks, but perhaps even longer. There have been very many contradictory statements from him, members of his cabinet and senior ministers about just what the end game of this conflict is meant to be. At the same time, Iran is showing no signs of letting up and perhaps taking even the Americans by surprise in the way that it has hit American targets, including the US Embassy in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, and also America's allies in the Gulf. So they're not showing any signs of backing down either. And in all of this, India finds itself in a tough spot because for decades, India has done a very delicate balancing act in the region. But today, it appears that India may have chosen a side, and that side may be of the US and Israel. Joining us first on the program today to take us through these fast-paced developments is Ambassador Talmiz Ahmed, who has served as India's envoy to Saudi Arabia, to the UAE and Oman, and knows the region very, very well. Ambassador, thank you very much for being with us. Let me ask you straight off, is this going to get worse in your view before it gets any better?
It is going to get worse. The reason is that the conflict is open-ended. The Israelis have death and destruction as their principal aim. As far as the Americans are concerned, it's possible that Netanyahu persuaded Donald Trump that this would be a short, sharp operation, that we would decimate the top leadership, and that he would go down in history as the greatest American president. This is a war of delusions. There is not going to be any regime change. As far as the Iranians are concerned, they have lethal firepower at their disposal, and they are quite willing to carry on the conflict for as long as it takes, because they have to take vengeance for the assassination of their supreme leader. So yes, I do fear that this is going to be a prolonged conflict. It could end only in one way, and that is the Americans finally realizing the folly of their ways and finally deciding that they do not need any more conflict, and they put pressure on the Israelis as well. This is a tall order, I admit that, but that's the only way this will stop anytime soon.
As you said, sounding a note of warning there that this is going to probably be a prolonged conflict, we've also heard President Trump not ruling out the possibility of putting boots on the ground. What are the implications of that if that should happen?
President Donald Trump is not just a megalomaniac consumed with hubris. He is also thoroughly delusional, makes numerous statements one after the other, many times contradicting himself. He basically seeks to strut on the world stage like a great military commander and statesman, possibly a modern day Julius Caesar, Augustus Caesar, or General Patton. But this is a make-believe. At the end of the day, he's a cartoon figure. Now he talks of, he doesn't have a clue about what is happening. He doesn't know much about Iran. He has been deluded into this conflict. About boots on the ground, I would be very surprised. The principal source would be that you cross into Iran through the Gulf, from the Gulf, like the landings you had at Normandy. I'm not sure that's going to serve any useful purpose. There will be several American casualties. It's not going to bring down the regime, and they're certainly not going to be able to do anything useful. Recall here what happened in the case of Iraq. The Americans occupied Iraq for 20 years. They gave rise to extremist elements. They gave rise to Abu Musab Zarqawi and then the Islamic State. They finally packed their bags and ran from Iraq the way they did separately from Vietnam, from Afghanistan, and from Libya.
And we've seen the consequences of their attempts to or their interventions in these countries and regime change everywhere. It was a complete disaster. But can I
Absolutely.
ask you, Ambassador, how worried are you about the Indian diaspora living in these Gulf countries? There are more than 9 million Indians who live and work here. The government of India has said today that their priority is obviously their safety and well-being. Um, you know, this would be a big challenge, wouldn't it, for the government of India at this time?
This is a war zone. The war zone now covers the entire Gulf. It is in this space that we have 10 million Indians. They are the majority community, majority expatriate community in every country of the GCC. For several years, commentators like myself have counseled government of India to be actively involved with the security scenario in the region. We have warned about this in terms of our energy security, in terms of our economic interests, and above all, in terms of the interests of our community. 10 million people cannot be evacuated, and certainly not during a war. We therefore have to be shoulder to shoulder with our Gulf colleagues, with our Gulf friends. They are passing through a very difficult time, and when we have been with them in good times, we now should be with them in these difficult times as well.
I think that's clearly why the Prime Minister has spoken to now leaders of several of these Gulf countries over the last 2-3 days and expressed the concerns in particular for the Indian communities living there. But can I ask you, Ambassador, how do you look at India's position on this? Now, there has been criticism in some quarters that the government has not taken a clear stand on the assassination of Iran's supreme leader. There's been no condemnation of that, no condemnation of the American Israeli strikes. In fact, quite the opposite, where we have Benjamin Netanyahu actually saying, sort of in a very gushing way, about how thankful he is to Prime Minister Modi for his support. So do you feel the Indian position has shifted this time, that this time India has chosen a side?
India has very clearly chosen a side. Over the last 2 years, we were half hearted in terms of our responses to the various UNGA resolutions. Somehow, we did not have a very clear and forceful position. It seemed as if the leadership's heart was entirely with Israel, and that our various statements talking about Palestinian aspirations, talking about two-state solution, they were pro forma. They had no serious purpose or intent behind them. But now it is very clear Prime Minister Modi's visit to Israel on 25-26 February, just a day before the commencement of hostilities, is a very clear signal that India has opted to affiliate itself with the Israeli side. Possibly UAE is also a part of this alignment of Israel, UAE, and India. We seem to have calculated that this is in our long term interest, that we buy the agenda of the Netanyahu government, that there is a Shia axis and a Sunni axis that threatens regional security. I will say to you very categorically,
But
I
is
do
it in
not.
India's interest?
I do not believe it is in India's interest. India is a very large country. We cannot associate ourselves with taking sides with one side against the other. We have substantial relations with all the countries of the region. Our role should be to promote peace and stability in the region, not to support one military side against the other. And I don't think much good will come out of this. This is also, I would say, the timing is somewhat flawed, because in the midst of a military conflict and in the midst of a diplomatic churn, we have every reason to sustain strategic ambivalence or strategic ambiguity. This is not the time to be taking side because it serves no purpose from the Indian side. After all, there is an ongoing difference of opinion between Saudi Arabia and the UAE, but we have very close ties with both of them. Indeed, Saudi Arabia also has 3.5 million Indians living there. We have very substantial energy ties with them. Are we going to mortgage all those ties because temporarily we seem to be seeing a certain positive role for as far as Israel is concerned? I believe that we should have been, up to now we have been low key, up to now we have been ambivalent. Why was it necessary on the eve of war for us to affiliate ourselves in the way that we have done? I don't understand our approach and I regret it very deeply.
And there's also the question, isn't there, about respecting international law, which clearly, I mean, since Trump did what he did in Venezuela, and now his threats on Greenland, these all have huge consequences for the entire world. So even on that principle, should India not have taken a stronger stand? And
Absolutely
yet
correct.
we seem to be wanting to not upset Donald Trump.
I agree with you. The Trump phenomenon is something the international community has not seen for several decades, if not centuries. A major world power led by a president who has no intellectual capacity, no gravitas, no understanding of strategic issues, is bloated with self ego, and is a megalomaniac. He is very easily influenced. Witness what happened in the case of Netanyahu whispering to him about regime change. Successive American presidents have wanted to effect regime change in Iran, but realized the consequences of such a hazardous initiative. But Donald Trump was very easily influenced. On 11th February, when Netanyahu made his visit to Washington, he was able to persuade the president and he launched the attack, killed 40 people, including the supreme leader, and now has dragged the Americans into a war which will bring no good advantage as far as the Americans are concerned and as far as West Asia is concerned. I also agree with you with regard to India seeking to appease Donald Trump, that by this visit to Israel, standing shoulder to shoulder with Israel, we are not only giving very bad signals all across West Asia. If we are seeking to appease Donald Trump, I think it is a mistake, because Donald Trump will not be appeased by these silly gestures. What he sees is that he sees himself as the emperor. You are supposed to be bowing before him in any case. He will be angry if you don't bow before him. India should have taken a very firm, principled position that we will not be bullied by anybody, even if we have to pay a price. Do recall here that right at the time of our independence, we were pressurized by the same Americans to join the Cold War on their side, and we refused. At that time, we had no economic prowess. We had a country that was still suffering the trauma of partition. We were still trying to put together a nationhood, and in that context, we took a firm line. Now, at the stage when our economy is the fourth largest in the world, we have such a self-confident community, and we have so much strength available to us in terms of the military terms. Why could we not have stood up to this? To this bully and made it clear that we will not bow before you. But now, seeking to appease him, we have made ourselves completely ridiculous.
Well, Ambassador Talmiz Ahmed, you're as blunt and as outspoken as ever, and perhaps that is what is needed at this hour as the world lurches from one crisis to the next. Thank you very much for joining us on India and the World on Decoder today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Nidhi. I wish you all the best.
Well, joining us now on Decoder is Ambassador K.C. Singh, who has served as India's envoy to Iran and has, of course, a lot of expertise and knowledge on the region. Thank you very much, Ambassador Singh, for joining us. I just wanted to get your take firstly on Iran itself and the impact of this war on Iran. Ambassador Talmiz Ahmed was just speaking to us. He believes that this is not going to lead to any kind of regime change. What is your view? Are the Americans totally out of their depth on this one?
Nidhi, I said this many weeks ago. I've said it time and again since then, that this regime is not going to crumble. And that's the first mistake they made. They thought it's a kind of Venezuela plus. They take out the top guy and then they'll find some other people who will collaborate with them. They'll split the IRGC and people will rise up and we'll have happiness thereafter. And probably they can bring Shah's son in as a symbolic head. But this was not going to happen because this is not a one-person regime. This is an alliance, a historical alliance between the clerics and the armed services. And the Revolutionary Guards are separate from the army. The army consists of people who've been recruited without any background checks, but IRGC are people whose backgrounds are checked. They see their loyalty, they see their commitment to the revolution, and then they're brought into that. So you have this alliance, and then you have the besieged who run into many million, who are their paramilitary force. And it goes down to the village level because of religion, because of clerics. It's not a single person at the top. And I think what the supreme leader did was, I don't know how the Americans didn't see through this. He was prepared for this. He has made multiple layers of successors, his own successors of the Revolutionary Guard commanders, and so on and so forth. So he's got multiple layers of successors because they saw what happened to Hezbollah. When the leader was killed, another guy was named, Israel took him out, another guy was named, took him out. So they've got 3 or 4 layers where even if one person's taken out, chaos doesn't follow. There is an arranged succession. And secondly, there is, also they have delegated powers to the commanders in the field. That is a breakdown of command and control. They know what to do, what to fire at whom. And I think thirdly, the most important thing is they underestimated the strength of the drone strength. They knew the drones, the Iranians have them and they're indigenously producing. They are the ones who were giving them to Russia. But more than that, they're missiles. And I think the Chinese have given them some of the latest technology on missiles. So they went on the basis of what happened last June 2025, where Iran was, they thought they were still talking and they were taken aback. They were not ready to retaliate. It took them a while and then they retaliated only.
But this time they were better prepared.
They were ready for it. Some even say probably the supreme leader wanted. And then the other thing they don't understand is the role of martyrdom in Shiism.
Yes.
It goes back to Hussein and Hassan, the sons of Ali. So it's something which has been there for...
It's interesting you say that because, we know that this has been a very oppressive regime in Iran for decades now. And that's why we've also seen street protests, including as recently as just a few weeks ago, where Iranian civilians were coming out onto the streets and protesting against the government and its policies. And so when Donald Trump stood up on the first day of this war and in a sense called for regime change, in fact he did, and he said that the people of Iran can use this opportunity to step in and take over. Yet while we do see sections of Iranians celebrating this, no one's actually, there's no sign of any kind of a revolution in that sense, as we know it, happening in the country. So why do you think that that's not happening in Iran?
Look, Nidhi, they got the sequence wrong. They did it a few weeks ago, as you know, when the protests were there. They did infiltrate, Mossad managed to infiltrate a lot of people with weapons into the country. And that's why a lot of soldiers were killed in stopping it. Now, of course, there's propaganda that goes around. They killed a lot of people. They came down heavily. Now, that is the time where I think they were expecting, and Israel had planned it, Mossad had done it. But I suspect what happened is that they were using the links which the Americans had provided to the satellites. And that, I think, Elon Musk's network. But what the Iranians did was they shut off the internet, and probably the Russians gave them the technology to find out who are communicating with the satellites using those American links. So they were able to grab all the people who were there in Iran, who were functioning as the people who were then spreading the thing, and they had groups with them. So the Iranians managed to grab them. So it took them 3-4 days or something. Now, once they had managed to grab them, even after a loss of life or whatever, the initial thing was gone. No, people are not going to keep rising up time and again. It happened once. Now, when you kill the supreme leader, there may be people who are not happy with the system. But look, there's a religious thing to it. When you kill the supreme leader and Ayatollah, then even people who were critical, those who are not totally opposed to the regime, even they'll say, this is crossing a red line. You don't do this. And I think the supreme leader, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. What I meant to ask you was, it's clear, therefore, that the Americans don't, obviously, they haven't thought this through. They don't seem to have an exit strategy. In your view and experience, what could a possible off-ramp be? And I'm just throwing this out there, which is that the fact that the Gulf countries, including the UAE, etc., that their tourism, their economy is being hit. The images of a 5-star hotel in Dubai being hit by a drone are constantly replaying around the world. Brits who moved to the UAE to escape taxes are questioning why they did that. So do you think that if that sustains, then it is the GCC countries that will then maybe put pressure on Washington to find a way out of this and end it soon? Is that a possible off-ramp? What do you think would allow any side to step back?
Look, the off-ramp, they thought the regime will fall. That was the first. The second off-ramp was, like Israel got away with it last time, bring America into the fight and then damage as much as you can. And after that, when Iran says, let's have peace, Israel gets away. So this time, I think Iranians are saying, we're going to take the revenge from Israel. So what they've done is, with their barrage of drones and so on and so forth, they are having Israel and having the Gulf countries run short on their defensive missiles, anti-missile defenses. And then there is a symmetry between how much is spent. The drone is worth $10,000. The missile that you fire to counter it is worth $3 million, $4 million. Now, how many of those are you going to fire? $1 billion worth? $2 billion worth? So Iran has planned where they are not going to run out of that. And they've got them inside the mountains, underground. Aerial bombing is not going to help. That is why even when the B-2 bombers went in last time and President Trump declared the nuclear program is dead and eliminated, why is he still saying, I'm going after the nuclear program? Because they were able to bring parts of that mountain down. But when something is 100 feet below a mountain, and Iran has got 2 huge ranges of mountains, it's not a flat land, it's not desert. So in that, they have, I think the Iranians have got underground places where they're storing, where they're assembling, where they're pulling things out and then firing. So if they continue this firing, now it's a battle of attrition. Who is the one who runs out of it? So they don't want to, and there's a news because Larijani has said the Americans have said no to the Americans. They wanted a ceasefire. So he told them nothing doing. There's no ceasefire this time because Israel is very small and Iranians have shown that they are, each passing day, they're bringing the next generation of missiles, multiple, it break into multiple missiles.
I think what's also particularly worrying is that they're not just hitting military targets, that they're looking at hitting symbols of, the economy, as I said, when you look at Dubai, hotel, and they've even hit Oman. I mean, Oman is the most, shall we say, the most sensible of all and has been the mediator in talks with the United States and Iran. But finally, Ambassador Singh, the economic impact of this, particularly on India with the Strait of Hormuz and how much oil that India imports from this region. Now, we have already closed off pretty much, thanks to Trump, the purchase of Russian oil. But what happens if prices dramatically go up, as they've already started doing, of oil that we're importing from the Gulf? What do we do in that situation?
I'm sure the Petroleum Ministry must be already talking to the Russians. And we'll have to, I'm sure, we'll tell the Americans, you brought this on us. Now, we can't be sitting here. We have to go back to the Russians. I can't see how President Trump is going to stop you from buying the Russian oil under these conditions. So we'll be doing that. Now, I don't know how much of Russian oil is available because they've already promised to the Chinese after we stop buying it. And if the Chinese are not getting from the Gulf, although there are reports that the Iranians are allowing tankers going to China to go through the Strait of Hormuz. I don't know whether that's correct or not correct. But essentially, they haven't blocked the strait. What has happened is that when there's the threat, one or two ships are hit, the insurance premium has gone up.
That's
As a
right.
result, yeah, no owner of containers willing to take a risk or willing to pay that kind of money, or they're not getting the insurance. So as a result, it just stops the transit through the Strait of Hormuz. But we'll be looking elsewhere. What else? And Venezuela can't be supplying you all the oil, as President Trump said, because they
I
don't
think it's
have
very
the.
interesting that you say that India may have to go back to the Russian option if it has no choice, and tell the Americans, you put us in this situation, we don't have any option but to do this. Ambassador KC Singh, thank you so much for joining us today. We will come back to you over the course of the next few days and weeks to get your perspective as this big story continues to unfold. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you.
And joining us now on DeKoder to take us through this big story, we have Michael Mulroy. He is a former US Marine, a retired CIA officer. He was the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense. We also have senior journalist and West Asia expert, Mr. Wael Awad, joining us today. Thank you both very much. Mr. Mulroy, to you first. President Trump says this is a war that could go on for 4 to 5 weeks, perhaps even longer. What is your take on this? What is the end game here? Have you been able to decipher it?
So good to be with you all and your audience. I think what he's talking about specifically is that's what the Department of Defense has said that they would like to have to be able to degrade the nuclear program and especially the ballistic missile capacity, manufacturing capacity, arsenals, launchers, and the naval capacity of the Iranian. And that's how long it's going to take for them to be able to do that effectively. Of course, they should be, hopefully, looking for diplomatic off ramps to this for the entire time.
But do you think that there is the option of a diplomatic off ramp in the near future? It seems that things are just getting worse even as we speak.
Yes, that's a fair point. I don't know that the Iranians are very interested in talking now. I mean, 49 of their most senior leaders have been killed, and the ones that are remaining seem to be very much focused on trying to expand this into a regional conflict by attacking the Gulf partners, by closing the Straits of Hormuz. Several things that I think are against their interests, but they seem to be willing to focus on creating chaos and making this a much broader war than any kind of reconciliation to get back in negotiations.
How do you think, though, that this could play out even politically, or how it is already playing out back home, in the sense that I already see polls done by different agencies that show that a majority of Americans are not in favor of this war, that in fact it goes against everything Mr. Trump used to say in his campaign, that, he would not do what previous presidents did, and he's just gone ahead and done exactly that. But there are crucial midterms in a few months. This I'm sure will have a political blowback. You've already lost 6 American soldiers. That number could go up, as the president says. So this is a big gamble for him politically, isn't it?
Very, very much so politically. We've already seen 60% of the American public is not in favor of any of the military action that's going on right now. That was almost immediate. That was before we lost, as you mentioned, 6 service members. And that opposition is likely to only grow as this goes on. That's not usually the case when the U.S. enters a conflict, even if the conflict itself turns out to be very unpopular, like the Iraq War. At the onset, it's usually somewhat of a rally around the flag effect. We're not seeing that at all, and it's across the spectrum. It's not just from the Democrats, it's from many on the far right, especially in the MAGA movement, who, like you said, consider this to be completely the opposite of what President Trump ran on, campaigned on, and what that part of the party stood for, which is disentanglement from foreign conflicts overseas.
Mr. Mulroy, stay with us. I just want to go across to Mr. Wael Awad. He's a very senior journalist who's from the West Asian Middle East region and joins us on the program today as well. Mr. Awad, what's your sense of how bad this is going to get before it gets any better?
Well, thank you for having me, Nidhi. It's getting worse, and it will be more with the days to come because the objectives are different from what the declared one and undeclared one. The declared one is the nuclear issue, as you said it, but now with the attack on the top leaderships of Iran, the infrastructure, the Republican Guards, and public places, it's more to do with the regime change policy that the United States did not hide it. Neither the United States nor Israel have been hiding it for so long. They have been saying it that they wanted to ensure this time that the Islamic regime of Iran should be removed. So there is no question of a political Islam existed in this part of the world, and that's why you see President Trump has been openly saying now he wanted to change the regime. And if he wanted seriously the nuclear deal to be discussed, he would have continued the discussion in Geneva, where there was a breakthrough between the American and the Iranian, according to the foreign minister of Oman. But what happened next day? They tracked all the phone calls of the negotiating teams, and then they attacked the leadership of Iran. So therefore, I think it's taking longer time, and I don't see any glimpse of light in the near future.
There seems to be a certain element of the American leadership being taken aback by the fact that the Iranians attacked Gulf countries in the way that they have over the last few days, including the UAE and Saudi Arabia, etc. Now, in your view, Mr. Awad, do you think that if that continues, that may force them to put some pressure on Washington to find a way out of this mess, or not?
No, Washington was anticipating this. Nidhi, Iranian officials went to the Gulf country and warned them that if an American attack takes place on Iran, and they will be legitimate target for them, all the military bases of the United States in the region. And having said that, they carried out with their threat, and they have been attacking, because what happened is that the United States ships and all the airplanes are quite far from the radars and the site of the Iranian to attack. So they are trying to attack those closer to them. And I think the military bases of the US, which is stationed around 60 to 70,000 American Marines, it's a target for them. So therefore, this is escalating into a regional war, no doubt about it. And I think the Gulf country also feeling the heat, because it's not only the military bases of the United States being attacked. We have seen attack on airports, we have seen attack on malls, in hotels. That's also, according to the Iranian, it's the American officials and the Marines and the spies of Israel are on those hotels. And even, yes, some of the reports says that a couple of them have been killed are Israelis and US citizens. But also there are reports, which is on the ground from Qatar and UAE, that there are agents from the Mossad are being caught by these countries, but nobody talked about it.
Well, last question to both of you, and Mr. Mulroy, to you first. Regime change in the past has been a disastrous policy. We've seen it in Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan. It's just not worked. And, the Americans have walked away from these countries bitterly, with a very bitter experience of what happened. Therefore, are you concerned that this will end badly?
Bigger concerns is that we've started a war without really an objective to get out of it. So, I mean, the military objectives are fairly clear: degrade the nuclear program, ballistic missiles, the naval capacity. But how do you get out of this war? And regime change is really it's not just not on the table. It's really not possible with just air power. The president has stated that he'd like to see an uprising of Iranian citizens. And obviously there is a desire for the Iranian population to throw out the regime, but there's no capacity to do so. They're unarmed. And the only people that have arms in Iran are the IRGC and the regular military. There's no real capacity, and there's no way to get them the capacity to do that. So this idea that this is going to be a regime change, I think, is not accurate. And quite frankly, even the ones you listed where we went in with ground power and actually did change the regime didn't turn out well for us. But there's really no way to do it from the air. And I think that's something that the U.S. administration should stop talking about, and quite frankly, stop pushing citizens who might be sent to their death if they go out on the streets and start protesting against the regime right now.
Well, pretty scary times ahead. Thank you very much, Mr. Mulroy and Mr. Awad, for joining us today with your perspectives on that unfolding story. It is a story we will continue to track very, very closely right here on DeKoder. Thank you very much.